What if your nationality could instantly change how people treat you without saying a word? Americans often imagine the world as a welcoming playground, filled with eager smiles and open arms. But what if I told you that in some places, that U.S. passport could be more of a burden than a badge of freedom? It's not always about war, politics, or even power. Sometimes it's about decades of resentment, misunderstood intentions, or lingering wounds from history that haven't quite healed. So, where exactly are Americans not so welcome? And why do some countries go out of their way to make it known? In this video, we're counting down the top 10 countries that dislike Americans in 2025. Some of these nations are no surprise, but a few of them might completely shock you. Especially number 4, which you probably think is friendly. But behind the smiles lies an entirely different story. Stay tuned, because this is about more than travel. It's about politics, perception, and how the world really views America in 2025. In the scenic valleys of the Balkans, beneath the vibrant culture and welcoming spirit, Bosnia and Herzegovina carries painful memories of the 1990s Yugoslav wars. These wounds are more than physical, they're psychological, political, and generational. While the U.S. played a key role in ending the conflict through the Dayton Accords, many in the region, especially among the Bosnian Serb population, view American involvement as uneven, even self-interested. NATO bombings, which the U.S. led, are remembered vividly, not just as military strikes, but as moments of deep national humiliation. Today, resentment simmers in political circles and among older generations who see the U.S. as having divided the country under the guise of peace. Anti-American graffiti still exists in some towns, and nationalist politicians often invoke U.S. policy as a cautionary tale. Even though many young Bosnians embrace Western pop culture, deep-rooted mistrust lingers just beneath the surface. The sentiment isn't about individual Americans. It's about what the United States represents in their historical narrative. Venezuela and the U.S. have been locked in a diplomatic standoff for years, and by 2025, things are still icy. Once one of Latin America's richest nations, Venezuela has suffered extreme economic collapse, skyrocketing inflation, and a humanitarian crisis. And for many Venezuelans, the finger points directly at the United States. American-led sanctions are viewed not as a policy tool, but as punishment. Many believe that these sanctions worsened food shortages and medical crises, turning an already struggling country into a near-failed state. Despite these challenges, the average Venezuelan is warm, passionate, and family-oriented. But politically, there's a definite edge. The government continues to promote anti-American rhetoric in schools, media, and politics. Ironically, American pop culture is still consumed widely. U.S. music, fashion, and technology remain aspirational, but the admiration doesn't extend to Washington. Belarus is a nation caught in the Cold War's shadow. Governed by Alexander Lukashenko for decades, the country remains one of the most politically isolated in Europe. And in this isolation, a clear narrative has been built. The West, and especially the U.S., is the enemy. For years, American sanctions and criticism of Belarusian elections have been cast by state media as proof of foreign interference. Lukashenko's regime blames many of the nation's economic woes on U.S.-led policies. And with Belarus growing ever closer to Russia, American ideals like free press and democracy are painted as tools of destabilization, not freedom. Even average citizens, influenced by a tightly controlled media landscape, are wary of the West. While there may be curiosity about life in America, many Belarusians associate the U.S. with moral decay, chaos, and imperialism, messages pushed relentlessly by the state. In 2025, hostility hasn't cooled. It's been institutionalized, normalized, and reinforced by regional politics. In Belarus, being American isn't just foreign, it's potentially threatening. Americans can visit, but be prepared for awkward questions, occasional mistrust, and a few unexpected debates over dinner. Turkey's place on this list might surprise some, but for those paying attention to international relations, it's no shock. The U.S.-Turkey relationship is strained. Issues range from U.S. support of Kurdish forces in Syria, which Turkey considers terrorists, to disagreements over NATO and even clashes over freedom of speech and religion. Turkish media often portrays the United States as hypocritical, pushing for democracy abroad while interfering in sovereign nations. And on the streets, tourists are generally welcomed. Turkish hospitality is famous. But Americans may encounter pointed political conversations, especially in smaller towns or conservative regions. Tensions flare during times of conflict or elections, and in those moments, anti-American protests are not uncommon. Yet American fast food chains, Netflix shows, and smartphones are everywhere. The contradiction is clear. There's a cultural admiration, but a deep political distrust. Iran and America, a story of enmity written in bold headlines since 1979. The Iranian Revolution, the hostage crisis, economic sanctions, and military tensions have created an unbreakable wall between the two nations. And in 2025, little has changed. Iranian leaders routinely blame the U.S. for regional instability, from Iraq to Lebanon. State-sponsored rallies often include "Death to America" chants, not as a literal call to violence, but as a symbolic expression of defiance. Still, everyday Iranians tell a different story. Many young people secretly admire the freedoms, fashion, and innovation of the West, especially the U.S., but don't expect open arms. American tourists are only allowed to enter Iran through authorized tour groups with strict itineraries. Independent travel is off limits. Surveillance is high, and any mention of politics can get you into serious trouble. It's a nation of paradoxes, where hatred and curiosity live side by side. The relationship between the United States and Russia has deteriorated significantly in recent years, and in 2025, it's at near Cold War levels. The reasons are complex: territorial disputes, cyber attacks, election interference, and dueling propaganda machines. Russia sees the U.S. as a major geopolitical threat, and vice versa. Russian state media portrays Americans as naive, aggressive, and morally corrupt. Meanwhile, American media often paints Russia as a shadowy, scheming enemy. On the streets of Moscow or St. Petersburg, you may not face outright aggression, but don't expect warmth either. In rural areas or small towns, suspicion runs deeper, especially if you're vocal about politics. American NGOs have been shut down, U.S. journalists are harassed, and the government keeps a close watch on foreign visitors. Still, many Russians have family in the U.S. or consume American media behind closed doors. It's a strange love-hate dynamic, one shaped by decades of distrust and cultural rivalry. Pakistan is a complicated entry on this list. The country has been both ally and adversary to the U.S., sometimes at the same time. On paper, relations appear stable, but in the hearts of many Pakistanis, especially in rural or conservative areas, there's a long-standing resentment toward America's role in the region. Drone strikes in tribal areas, civilian casualties, and the perceived betrayal during the Afghanistan pullout still sting. Conspiracy theories involving the CIA, secret bases, and hidden agendas are common. Anti-American protests happen from time to time, usually triggered by global events like Quran burnings or Middle East interventions. However, major cities like Lahore, Karachi, and Islamabad are far more cosmopolitan. Many Pakistanis admire U.S. education, tech, and lifestyle. Pakistani Americans contribute significantly to U.S. society, and that bridge softens some of the animosity. Still, tread carefully. Discussions about politics or religion can escalate fast, and as a tourist, you're best advised to be respectful, low-key, and informed. Now here's the entry that catches many people off guard. To most tourists, China seems orderly, safe, and efficient. But underneath the polished exterior lies a mountain of tension between the U.S. and China, and it's only growing in 2025. From tech wars to trade disputes, Taiwan tensions to TikTok bans, both nations are engaged in a cold conflict of influence. The Chinese government is running a full-throttle propaganda campaign against the West, especially America. News outlets portray the U.S. as chaotic, corrupt, and collapsing. Students are taught that Western democracy is a failed experiment. While most Chinese citizens remain polite to foreigners, deep-rooted suspicions exist. As an American, your movements may be tracked more closely. Journalists and researchers face serious risks. Surveillance is intense. Cameras, facial recognition, and monitoring apps are everywhere. American apps are banned or restricted, and U.S. tech companies are heavily scrutinized. Still, American culture is incredibly popular. Hollywood, sneakers, slang, it's all cool to the youth. But admiration doesn't erase mistrust. America's two-decade military presence in Afghanistan left behind deep scars, and in 2025, the country is still healing. Under Taliban rule, anti-American rhetoric is part of everyday governance. Public executions, strict dress codes, and bans on Western education are back in full force, and the United States is blamed for much of the chaos. To many Afghans, the U.S. didn't liberate, it invaded, destabilized, and abandoned them. The chaotic 2021 withdrawal is etched into the national psyche as a moment of betrayal. Tourism, practically non-existent for Americans. Most Western NGOs have pulled out, and anyone with an American passport is viewed with suspicion, or worse. But here's a lesser-known fact. Some Afghans, especially those who worked with U.S. forces, remember Americans fondly. These stories are whispered in private, far from the ears of the regime. Still, this is one of the most dangerous countries for Americans in 2025. No sugarcoating it. No surprise here. North Korea is the most openly anti-American country on the planet. Its entire political identity revolves around resisting what it calls U.S. imperialism. Children are taught that Americans are the enemy. State-run museums display photoshopped images of American war crimes. Propaganda posters show American soldiers as bloodthirsty monsters. In 2025, Americans are banned from entering the country altogether. The rare few who enter via China face strict monitoring, limited access, and constant surveillance. And those who've broken the rules? They've faced prison, or worse. Behind the scenes, defectors say some North Koreans secretly admire American wealth, music, and freedom. But expressing it openly is a punishable offense. This is a country where being American is not just frowned upon, it's criminalized. So there you have it. 10 countries where Americans are viewed with suspicion, distrust, or even open hostility. So what does this list really mean? It's not about hatred, it's about history, perception, and power dynamics. Most citizens don't hate Americans. They just react to the shadow their government's policies cast. And in some cases, governments push fear to maintain control. So if you're American, remember, respect goes further than entitlement. Learn local customs. Avoid political hot takes, and always approach with curiosity and humility. Now tell us, have you ever felt unwelcome while traveling abroad? Drop your story in the comments, hit like, subscribe, and get ready for the next video.